If I were to name this as a message or a sermon, I would call it Living a Life Well Learned, Lifelong Lessons Learned from God and Family. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate. That's Psalm 127, 1 through 5. When I was a little girl, my grandmother and my mother had meditation books that they read along with the Bible. The men in our family were Baptist preachers, Reverend Martin Luther King Sr., my daddy, Reverend Alfred Daniel Williams King, and my uncle, the famous Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So I grew up with the Bible and with meditation messages, such as books of great beauty and great wisdom, leaves of gold, apples of silver. And so much of what I learned as a little girl growing into adulthood that gives me the opportunity in 2020 going into 2021. And here we are, January 2021 right now. If I were to look back on 2020, my soul would look back and wonder how I got over. And certainly that is with the strength of God and many of the lessons that I learned from my family and other mentors. As I share with you just a few nuggets, and that's what I call them, from people that have inspired me throughout my lifetime, I pray that you will be led by the Spirit of the living God. And as you work to continue your lives, you will find that strength and encouragement that's going to be required in 2021. When I was growing up, my mother, Mrs. Naomi Ruth Barber King, and Mom is still living today. She's 89 years old now. And we went through so many experiences in the 20th century. And also during the 1960s civil rights movement, when our home was bombed and my uncle, Reverend Martin Luther King, was shot, and then my daddy, Reverend A.D. King, was killed in the same movement the next year. And I would watch my mother, and my mother would say, "Baby, we're going to have to heal on our feet. We won't have time to give up. We won't have time to cry." And when I think about those days, there's a scripture, and it says, "Beloved, I desire that you prosper and be in good health, even as your souls prosper." And so I remember my mother right now telling me to heal on my feet and to trust God. And so I hope that's something that you can explore as well. My grandmother, Alberta Christine Williams King, we called her Big Mama, and that's my daddy's mother. She was a wonderful piano and organ player. As a matter of fact, she was killed in the 1970s while playing the organ, playing the Lord's Prayer on the organ at Ebenezer Baptist Church. And then I know you're looking at me like, well, you're telling us that and you're not crying and you're not angry. You don't want vengeance. I don't. In the King family legacy, we've always been taught to love, to forgive. But I remember the beautiful music of Mama King, Big Mama King. And she was a beautiful worship leader, choir director, mentor. And so it makes me remember that we have to worship the Lord in spirit and in truth. My mother's mama, Big Mama Bessie, had the wonderful gift of hospitality. I call her a domestic engineer She was a cook and a housekeeper in her lifetime. And my mother was brought up, and my mother would get the beautiful dresses that the little girls would no longer wear in the families at where my grandmother worked. But she was a wonderful, fantastic cook. And so I remember she would come home and cook her biscuits and her rolls and things for us. And sometimes I would have parties, and she delighted in baking those rolls and passing them out. I said, Big Mama Bessie, you don't have to do that. But she loved to serve others. So hospitality is a gift in our King family legacy as well. My daddy, Reverend Alfred Daniel Williams King, taught me about Jesus Christ, the miracles of Jesus. I remember I was about 12 years old, and Daddy was the pastor of the church, and he was a great pastor for everybody, but he loved to minister to youth, and he would take us on a youth retreat every year during all the churches where he pastored. He would do that, and Daddy was a championship swimmer as well. He won awards in swimming and all of that, which is why they tried to say he drowned accidentally. He didn't, because he was a championship swimmer. So there was a little mystery around his death during the Civil Rights Movement. But we were in Pensacola, Florida on the youth retreat, and Daddy had taught all of us how to dog paddle. We couldn't really swim, but we could dog paddle, right? So I jumped out in a wave, not thinking. And before a second passed, it seems, a wave picked me up and washed me out into the ocean. And I remember saying, Daddy! By the time I got to he had cut through those waves and lifted me up out of the water. And I basically was like, where's Jesus? Didn't you say he could walk on water too, Daddy? So the miracles of Jesus became very real to me through the ministry and the preaching of my daddy. My granddaddy, Reverend Martin Luther King Sr., after the death of his son, the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., and then several months later, Martin Luther King Jr. was shot in 68. In 69, my dad was found in our home swimming pool with no water in his lungs, so he didn't accidentally drown. But I remember Granddaddy saying, you have to love, you have to forgive, and thank God for what we have left. He told us to continue to care for the least of these. A few years later, in the 70s, my grandmother was shot, his wife, Alberta, playing the organ, the Lord's Prayer, at church. And he went to the jail where the man who had shot his wife was behind bars and said, son, you've taken away the most precious thing in the world to me, that I forgive you. So Granddaddy, with caring for the least of these, from the womb to the tomb, he convinced my mother not to have a procedure in 1950, which would have ended my life. They call it abortion today. It would have been abortion then, but he told my mama, you can't do that. That's not a lump of flesh. That's my granddaughter. I saw her in a dream 3 years ago. She has bright skin and bright red hair, and she's going to bless many people. Isn't that amazing? Prophetically, my granddaddy had a dream that saved my life. That's why when I say I have a dream, it's in my genes. That's from my granddaddy, not my uncle. My uncle, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., said many, many things during his lifetime. We have his books, his messages, his sermons. One of my favorites is, I've decided to stick with love. Hate is too difficult a burden to bear. He also said during his lifetime, the Negro cannot win if he's willing to sacrifice the futures of his children for immediate personal comfort and safety. So yes, there's great testimony for life from the womb to the tomb in the King family legacy. My aunt, Christine King Ferris, great teacher and educator for much of her life, and I've been a school teacher, I've been a college professor, film and music producer, I write and sing, I've got books and all of that. And yet, through the experiences of my own family, who always taught me you can do whatever it is that you dream that you want to do. Just do it for God. So those are things that I've learned from my family. My pastor of 33 years, founding pastor of Believers Bible Christian Church, Pastor Alan McNair and his wife, Anna McNair, taught me about faith working through love. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. Mrs. Anna McNair, a Proverbs 31 woman, same truths, Proverbs 31. Now, as I end this little part of the narrative, I had a mentor who's a Christian businesswoman, Dr. Mary Ellen Strong, and she was very successful, and yet she loved the Lord. So I guess she was an evangelist and a businesswoman. Those two can't go together. As long as you use all of your wealth of blessings to serve the Lord, that's important. My friend Ginger Howard and I have written a book. We wrote it in 2020. We are not colorblind. That means that we recognize ethnicity. We can see skin color, but we don't fight because of it. We see skin color as a gift of God that does not divide the human race. Of one blood, God created all people to live together on the face of the earth. So we are one blood and one race, one human race, with beautiful ethnicities. And that's an important message here as well. And finally, my goddaughter, Angela Stanton King. I have 6 biological children living, 2 children aborted, 1 miscarried, and I have many godchildren. Angela and I in 2020 had a remarkable experience. She was pardoned for some of her activities as a younger woman by the United States President in 2020. And she ran for office, congressional office. And today she is ministering now and serving the communities. All of my biological children are as well. And even my little grandchildren are beginning to do some of the things that they've seen me to do. So I've been tremendously blessed. And I want to say God bless you. I know that as you pursue your dreams, and I celebrate you and salute you. I will run to you. When I was just a little girl, my daddy, he read to me how Jesus Christ, the Son of God, came down to set us free. Beyond belief, yet Daddy, he said it was true. With faith in God and hope and love, there's so much here for you. promise came to me. Such miracles beyond belief. Yet Daddy, he said it was true. With faith in God and hope and love, there's so much here for you. Christ calms the storm, raises the dead, turns water into wine, and at His word, mere mortals do trust, and miracles come in time. The water and the blood, they could wash away the mud. Let me live and breathe and learn